Welcome. I hope you are having a wonderful night, dear viewer. Tonight, I will be telling some terrifyingly scary stories. Make sure to leave your feedback on the comments so I can make this the best experience for you. And if you have any stories you would like me to tell, you can send them through the link in the description. Let's begin. Story 1. I recently moved to a new town. Me and my dog. We went hiking early one morning on an old rail trail and met a fellow dog walker who told me there is a large group of other dog walkers who meet up in a field each morning to let the dogs play. He invited me to join, and I agreed, following him off the path. I was excited to meet new people and have a community. After walking deeper and deeper into a forest with no field in sight, I started to get uneasy vibes. It may sound crazy, but there was a crow that had been in a tree chattering away on the rail trail. It had followed us off the trail, flying from tree to tree and squawking aggressively at us. You couldn't ignore it. Then my BlackBerry beeped, indicating that I had lost service. It fully occurred to me that maybe I was in a vulnerable position. This man was much larger than me, probably close to double my weight. We had been walking for about 30 minutes off trail now. I made up some lie about losing track of time and said I would have to head out. He tried to talk me into staying and how much fun my dog would have. He reached down to pet my dog, and he lunged in a very aggressive manner, snapping and snarling at the man. My dog is a 95-pound boxer. The guy backed off and said, and I quote, "I'll let you go this time. Maybe another day." We turned and hightailed it out of there so fast. The crow followed my dog and me all the way back to my car and didn't leave until I pulled away. I learned later there is no field through the forest and no dog group that meets there. A few years later, a woman's car was found abandoned in the area, and she is still missing 10 years later. Story 2. I was there for 3 years. The station had an auto shop attached, but was rarely needed at night, so I typically just dealt with people coming for gas. Occasionally, I'd be asked to work on a car overnight from the day shift. One time, I found several bags of heroin leaking out from the driver's seat. I was nervous the owners would know I saw it, so I stuffed the bags back in. The station was out on a country road, so the types of customers I generally served were truckers or farmers, or the random couple driving home from a date. However, there were the anomalies. The car accidents. The drunk driver that killed a small family in the intersection out front. There was a vicious, blazing inferno coming out of that minivan. The dad made it out, but he was on fire and died in the middle of the road. One time, I served gas to someone who was being chased by the police. Of course, I didn't know that at the time. I just thought the driver was in a hurry. I was robbed at gunpoint, twice. It was the same 2 ski mask guys too. They just took turns speaking between the 2 incidents. Then there was the time an old guy drove up, got out of his car, and died of a heart attack 2 steps later. Those incidents were normal, or at least understandable, explainable. But there was one night something unexplainable happened. It was shortly after 3 a.m. Headlights drove in carrying a 1966 Pontiac Bonneville 2. Door cup. A thin trail of smoke was coming from under the hood. The inside of the windows were all fogged up, so I couldn't really see the interior of the car or the occupants. The car drove past the gas station and right into the auto shop. The lights weren't even on inside the shop, but the headlights lit it up. I went to greet the driver and flipped on the overhead lights of the shop, but they came on weak and dim. The driver's side door opened as I approached, and I was immediately hit with a stench of old, damp cloth and dust. A middle-aged man got out uneasily, like his knees were made of twigs. He wore one of those black Quaker hats with dark hair spiking from under it and a graying goatee. The man's face was covered in lines and wrinkles, and his eyes sunk back into his head. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. Check the oil. Check the engine. He choked out and walked past me, fumbling out an old box of matches. The passenger door closed and a middle-aged woman stood there. She had thick, dark hair that looked like it was greased through with gel and matted to her head, an uneven set of bangs cut across her forehead. The woman carried the same sunken-in eyes as the man, but her face was covered in days-old makeup. Rosy cheeks, blue eyeliner, red lipstick. Even through the smearing, you could tell it was applied with heavy exaggeration. Then the woman smiled at me. I wish she hadn't. Her teeth were dirty orange and speckled with black dots. Her gums were dark gray. I noticed she only had the front 6 teeth on her upper and lower jaws. She didn't appear to have any molars, which I shouldn't know, but she couldn't stop smiling to reveal that. The moment the woman saw me, her lips had stretched into a wide-mouthed grin that curved downward like a catfish. It was a strange and frightening smile, like it was pulled and stretched over a screaming face. The woman began speaking to me, but she spoke so softly I couldn't hear her. I kept leaning forward, trying to get a better ear, but the closer I got, the further her voice sounded. Then I realized we were inches from each other's faces. Her breath was rancid as she spoke, and I finally heard what she was saying. Don't go in car. The woman pulled back and I saw the scream behind the smile in her eyes. She was terrified. Joan. The driver was already outside the auto shop, lighting up a dirty-looking home-rolled cigarette. The woman, Joan, followed him. They gave me chills, and I was happy the two were going to wait outside. I watched the strange couple walk down to the edge of the gas station where it made up the corner of a quiet country intersection. I turned to the car, not really sure what to do. After I couldn't get under the hood, I figured there was a release latch under the steering wheel. I went to the driver's side door and saw the window was down. I leaned in through the window and searched and fumbled until I found the latch. I flicked it open and saw the hood pop up. As I was pulling myself out, a thought struck me. The window was up when the man drove in. It was up when he walked off. How did it get down? Then my eyes caught the rearview mirror. And what was in the back seat? There was a little boy staring at me. He sat calmly in the middle seat with his seatbelt still on. He had a strange, swirling facial scar that reminded me of a boy I went to grade school with, named Johnny Watkins. He'd been attacked by a dog when he was little and large portions of his face were horrendously scarred. That's what this boy looked like. And he had something that looked like mud and dirt smeared around his mouth and chin. The same smears were on his hands and wrists. The boy wore old, dirty overalls and a flannel shirt underneath. His eyes were locked on me. They carried an accusatory glare, like he was catching me stealing. I quickly blurted out, "Hey buddy, just checking out the engine. Then we'll get you and your parents on their way." The boy stared back, his brow furrowed down at the center, angrily. "They're not my parents," he croaked out. Then he started to make a strange sound. I couldn't tell what it was at first, but then it became clear. The boy was laughing in his own, odd way. It was like his breath was hitching up repeatedly during the inhale. I didn't know what to do or say, so I pulled myself out of the window and made my way to the hood. I looked out and saw Joan and the man were still at the corner, smoking and arguing. I popped the hood up and was greeted with a cloud of smoke. I figured it was a motor oil spill or leak at first. Then I stared down at the engine and I had no idea what to make of it. It looked foreign, but also homemade. It was all connected and had metal plates fastened around it, protecting parts of the wiring and cables, so it was next to impossible to see what was wrong. I honestly didn't know what the hell I was looking at, but I managed to find what looked like a small handle for a dipstick, and I twisted and pulled it out. It was for the oil. I cleaned it, put it back in, and pulled it to inspect. Basically dry. The little oil at the end felt gritty. It needed a change. The car was parked over our lift, so I didn't have to get in to move it. But I couldn't leave the kid in there. He had to get out. Safety precautions and all. I went to the driver's side window, but the window was up again. I tried to open the door, but it was locked. I went over to the passenger side and found it locked too. I peered in through the dirty windows to try to signal to the boy to open the door, but the back seat was empty. The car was empty. He was gone. The only explanation I could come up with was that the back seats of the car pulled down and allowed access to the trunk. So I checked the trunk, but it was also locked. I knocked on it, trying to get the boy's attention if he was inside, but nothing came back. I looked outside, but couldn't see Joan or the man. I was confused and nervous, and all I could think to do was explain that our lift wasn't working, so they'd need to get their oil changed at another shop in the next few days. Then I'd send them on their way. A loud clunk made me jump. On the other side of the garage, a loose wrench was on the ground. I walked over to it and picked it up. It had a small, child-sized muddy handprint on it, and suddenly, that odd laugh echoed out from somewhere in the garage. I raised the wrench to swing, but there was nothing to swing at. The loud metal rattling of the front, retracting door slamming shut made me yell. I went over to inspect the now shut door, but as I did, the retracting metal doors at the back slammed shut as well. At this point, I figured the kid was messing with me, so I called out to him, telling him playtime was over and to come on out. Then the power went out. The garage was completely black. Not a single window could be seen. I tried to open the front metal gate, but it wouldn't budge, like it was welded shut. More metal tools clanged against the ground. One slammed against the metal door, right beside my head, and another. The boy's hitched laughter croaked out from somewhere in the dark of the shop. I couldn't see anything, but knew the layout of the garage inside out and backwards. There was a flashlight on the far end of the wall to my right. There were shelves along the wall and a wide workbench I could follow. I moved along the metal door to the wall and found the edge of the bench. The boy's laughter got louder, echoing through the garage. It stopped sounding human though. It was more hyena-like, and the source of the laughter was getting closer to me. With it, I felt a hot, rotten breath assaulting my nostrils. It followed me along the bench and towards the end of the wall. Through laughing, the boy quietly repeated, "I'm gonna find ya. I'm gonna find ya." My foot hit what felt like a ratchet wrench, which loudly skittered across the metal grating on the floor. "Was that you?" the boy squealed out. Realizing I still had the wrench in my hands, I first picked up. I threw it across the garage, hoping to hit the back wall and cause a distraction. It left my hand, but it never landed. "There you are," the voice called out through laughs. Something shuffled behind me. I hit the end of the bench and reached up, knocking over multiple tools and causing a series of loud crashes. But I didn't care. I felt the flashlight grip and turned it on, spinning and pointing the light behind me. I wished I hadn't. The boy was 2 feet from me. I only saw his face for a moment, but that was enough. The boy's facial scar had unraveled, like layers of extra skin in some strange face scarf covering. Only the fleshy layers were actually attached to him and contained rows of needle, like teeth on the inside. When the skin flap opened, it tripled the original diameter of his mouth. I screamed and fell backward. I expected to hit the ground and immediately have the boy's frightening mouth biting down on my face or neck. I hit the pavement outside the garage instead. The lights of the gas station poured over me. I looked back into the garage from my back. The lights were on. The metal door was open. The Bonneville was still and silent. Windows closed and clear. Footsteps approached from behind me. I scrambled up and turned to see Joan, and the man had returned. He flicked his cigarette butt and approached me and mumbled, "How much?" I couldn't speak. My lower jaw moved, but all I could stammer out was, "Don't worry about it." The man shrugged and walked back to the car. I turned and found Joan there, staring up at me. She was whispering something quickly and repeatedly. I leaned in and heard it clearly. "You should have listened. You should have listened. You should have listened." The man called out from the car, snapping Joan back to him. Still smiling, Joan shook her head at me, tears rolling down her cheeks in dark smears. She walked back to the car and got in. The Bonneville started up and drove past me. The windows were no longer blurred by fog, so I could see inside clearly. I saw the man staring straight ahead. Joan, sitting passenger beside him, smiled out at me with worried eyes. Then I saw the back seat. It was empty. The boy was gone. I was so afraid, I locked the garage and the gas station, checked my car, then got in and drove for an hour before stopping. I called my boss and told him I was violently ill and had to lock up early. He was less than impressed, but I didn't care. I couldn't go back there, and I didn't. I gave my 2 weeks and called in sick for each shift. I never went back to the garage and tried to avoid gas stations at night now. But it's not just that. Now, whenever I hear someone laugh, I hear the boys laugh. That same odd upward hitch. No matter the person, every giggle or cackle comes out the same. And sometimes it turns into that higher, pitched hyena cackle. It's been happening more and more. It feels like one of those flus that start slow and take their time weakening your immune system before leveling you. Then tonight happened. I came home and there was a small, muddy handprint on the door handle of my apartment. There was one on the inside too. Story 3. Sonder. A word used to describe the profound feeling of realizing every stranger around you has a life as complex and important as your own. It's also the name of the town I grew up in. Sonder lies on the eastern coast of the UK, on the north side of England. If you reach Scotland, you've gone too far. But if you're in Scarborough, you've not gone far enough. It sits somewhere between there, though I don't think anyone could be more specific. You see, you can't find it on any map, printed or digital, new or old color-coded or satellite imagery. There is no sign of this town existing at all. If you pay enough attention online, you'll find the odd few people mentioning the place, like a whisper passing by in a busy place. You only know it's there if you're looking for it. Yet to a vast majority of the world, Sonder is just a word. I was born there and raised within its confines. I moved away at 15, about 10 years ago. It was peaceful seaside village, the type where everyone knows each other, the type where everyone knows each other, the type where when someone hosts a get, together, all residents are invited. It was a close-knit community. I still remember it with mostly fond memories. The waves lapping onto the sand all through the night. The cobbled streets scorching your bare feet as you walked back from the beach on a summer's day. The dark woods that overlook the town from High Hill. High Hill is what we called the hill that stood next to Sonder. It blocked any chance of a view to other towns or cities. We resided in a valley at the edge of the sea, and whilst we liked it there, it felt very secluded. The town had a few small businesses. My favorite was Uncle Pete's Pizza. Everyone called him Uncle Pete, although he wasn't actually anybody's uncle. But his pizza place was perfectly between our home and my mom's pub. Every Friday, she would pick up a pizza on the way home. Absolutely no exceptions. Me and my older brother Jacob were always excited for this. Much of the town had been there for generations, the population naturally getting smaller as more and more of it became family. But a few people would move there every now and then. All of them found the town in the same way, a leaflet coming through the letterbox while searching for somewhere to move to. Every single time, the same story. They were driven here by a house moving service. I guess with no directions or map, it would be difficult to make your own way here. They were lovely. They really helped us. They would always say, nobody ever really seemed to question it much. I mean, it's not like we were trapped. We could leave whenever we wanted. Make no mistake, Sonder was no prison. It didn't even feel like one. It's just difficult to find, and leaving just felt icky, like you shouldn't do it. As the internet became mainstream, it became more and more obvious to people that the town was so hard to find. Suddenly, people had friends from outside of Sonder, but they could never visit because they could never seem to find their way in. Jeep signal was weak, and opening any app on your phone that tracked your location wouldn't pinpoint you. One truly odd thing about Sonder was the appliances. All of them had the same logo on somewhere, the letter V in a circle. Since leaving, I've tried to research this company, but to no avail. The moving company that people arrived in also had this logo on their vans. The town had its issues, none more known than the scream singers. At night, if you listened hard enough, you could hear them. A chilling, soft sound. It was almost like a distant scream, yet more melodic. Something enchanting, yet fills you with dread. Nobody ever saw them, but someone in the town would go missing every now and then, maybe once or twice a year. Some lived alone and hadn't been seen in a few days before anyone realized. Some were cuddled up to their partner in bed, only for their partner to wake up with them no longer in their arms. The only thing they had in common is that there was never any sign of entry or struggle. My entire life, I've known the echoes over the valley to mean trouble, but my mother used to tell me stories of when the townsfolk thought they meant hope, a simpler time. It's difficult to pinpoint exactly when people made the connection between the disappearances and the whistles of the night, but they would always start a few weeks before a disappearance and stop the night after someone had gone missing. This had always intrigued me, but not as much as it did my brother. Jacob found it fascinating, perhaps because he had never had someone close to him taken and didn't understand the pain. To him, it was just a mystery wrapped in questions. Some believed the scream singers to be the ones taking these people. Some believed their calls to be a warning that something darker is coming, whatever people believed their intentions to be. Everyone knew that their somber singing over Sonder was only bad news. My fond memories of the town become clouded when the trauma of my final few days there enters my mind again. Years of therapy have helped me cope, but I feel talking about it publicly is the final thing that may bring me peace. As far as I know, I am the only person to have seen a scream singer, or at least the only living person. It was the summer solstice, the longest day of the year, the 21st of June. Sonder has always held a small festival on this day. It dated back almost a century at the time, being the 97th consecutive solstice celebration. The festival took place not during those long sunlight hours, but as the sun began to set and the longest day ceased, at about 9:30 p.m. But the town of Sonder felt more melancholy than usual, especially for the festivities that were going on. The scream singers had started their wails again about 3 weeks prior, getting louder and louder each passing night. Sure enough, about an hour after the festival began, you could faintly hear the noises again, piercing through the sweeter melodies of the festival and the chatter of the crowds. People tried to ignore it and continue the celebrations, but every time the wind blew in just a particular way to make the noises more prominent, you could see the look on everyone's faces. The unspoken, silent fear washing through the crowds like a wave. My mom's pub, really, our family pub, was right at the festival. As such, the doors were wide open and people kept coming in and out. It was always one of the busiest nights of the year. Me and Jacob were sat drinking red wine. He was 17 and had a proper glass, but I still had half lemonade in mine. It was the only night of the year I was allowed to drink alcohol. The festival was still going strong when Jacob had the idea to go a little out of town and get a better listen to the scream singers. I was hesitant, but I was always up for an adventure. So, half reluctantly, I agreed. We got a few streets away before the howling became louder than the music. We were stood in the perfect mix of unknown to one side and enjoyment to the other. We should not have kept going, but we did. We reached the final building before the cobbled streets turned to grass and mud, and didn't stop there. Without saying a word to each other, it was like we knew what we wanted to do. We wanted to be the first people to have seen the scream singers, the first to understand them. We didn't know that only one of us would catch a glimpse. High Hill was steep, but not too steep. You didn't need your hands to climb it. It just took a lot of energy. Every now and then, we looked back at Sonder. You would almost think it was a ghost town from how dark it looked, if not for the bright festival right in the center. The only clue of any life. All packed together. The sounds of cheering, singing, and music echoed up the hill. All the while, the sounds of ghostly wails echoed down. A battle between good and evil, not seen, but only heard. As we reached the dark woods, we looked at each other. It felt like we hadn't spoken in ages, so I broke that. We're really doing this. Jacob nodded. I knew he would. I just needed to say something. Hearing nothing but ghastly screeches was driving me insane. We wandered around in there for what seemed like forever, though it was closer to maybe 5 minutes. Every slight crunch made me flinch and turn around. There was never anything there, but the haunting screams which were all around us. We reached a clearing, and the sounds of the scream singers seemed louder than ever. In the center of the clearing was a rock, about as tall as me, and a little wider. Jacob held me, as he could clearly tell I was scared. It's all right, it's just sounds. There's nothing to be afraid of. Maybe we should head back. His words didn't comfort me. They only told me one thing. He couldn't see what I could see. Stood on the rock is something I will never get out of my mind. A tall, gray figure, about twice as tall as any human I'd ever seen. It had 2 arms, but only one hand. The hand it had looked what I can only describe as twisted. Its fingers weaved together in a way that didn't make sense, and certainly wasn't natural. The shape of it was overall humanoid, but the proportions were all wrong. It had no eyes, at least not at first. I was terrified looking at this thing, but the moment my heart truly dropped was when eyes appeared. They slowly came out of its skin. There was no evidence that this creature should even have eyes. There were no holes for them, but as its face opened in a mesmerizingly disturbing way, I saw 2 eyes slowly come forward. The face closed again, with the eyes looking right at us. There were only 2 eyes. I counted them. 1, 2. Its face opened up again as it let out a horrific scream. I ran. I ran faster than I ever had before in my life, only occasionally looking behind me to make sure Jacob was running with me. He was. But he wasn't running from the scream singer. He was only running to catch up with me. He had no idea why I was so scared at that moment. We ran all the way down High Hill, nearly tripping over. Running down a steep hill is difficult at the best of times. As we got back onto the cobbled streets, I turned around and looked up at the woods. No sign of anything chasing us, but the screams were still so loud, even down here. By this point, Jacob had caught up and was right beside me. He kept asking why I was running, but I was too shocked to answer him yet. We ran another street, and he reached out to hold me. I stopped running and let him hug me. He told me that whatever I saw, it was going to be okay, and that we were safe. I closed my eyes with tears streaming down my face. I opened my mouth and began to explain what I saw, getting words out between choking on my tears. It was this gray thing on the rock. You could see the rock, right? Well, on top, I realized the howling had stopped. I opened my eyes. Jacob wasn't there. I was standing in the middle of the street with my arms out, hugging nobody. I looked to my right and could see the festival. I felt empty and confused. I walked through the crowd, tears still streaming down my face. I found my mother at the bar, and she asked me where I'd been and if I knew where Jacob was. I told her everything, and she closed up for the night. We both knew that the scream singers had claimed their next victim. She wasn't angry at me for going to the woods. She held me tight, and neither of us spoke a word. We just wept and wept until we were too tired and empty to weep anymore. The next day was Friday. I got out of bed in the morning after absolutely no sleep. My mom was downstairs, packing boxes. She told me we were leaving that same day. Within an hour, we were in her car, driving away from home. We passed Uncle Pete's Pizza. I realized this was the first Friday in my life that we weren't eating from there. As we drove further away from the sea, and I saw outside of that small town for the first time, I already knew that leaving our life behind would not fix anything. Sonder is still out there. I hope somebody can find it.